Welcome back, guys. Today I thought we'd do a bit of a video on the R34 and how many different models and specifications there are. Some I'm sure you've heard of, some you probably haven't, some that I was finding out for the first time, and a few one-off models that got released to the general public. One thing it's worth noting with the R34 is that during its release time, which was 97, 98, they kind of focused, well, they kind of went away from that two-door sports car market and started really focusing on the sedan model. And they basically favoured majority of their media, car commercials, press releases and things like that on the four-door model. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I actually really like the four-door model myself. My cousin's got one too that it'll pop up shortly, and I'll show you the guys that one there. But they really favoured the four-door market, and their claim to fame for this was something called driving body, basically reinforcing the body to make it more rigid and able to corner and handle better than what your average Skyline would, I guess. So this one here is my cousin Manuel's car. This is going to be making an appearance on the show shortly. We're going to be doing a few bits and pieces to it. It's relatively stock, like mine was. I think realistically it's only got 18-inch wheels. We've done some interior work on it as well, but apart from that, it's pretty much stock as a rock. So we'll start moving into some of the various different models now, which I'm sure you guys are probably thinking, well, this is going to be boring, but it's actually quite interesting because some I've never heard of, and I tend to think of myself as a bit of a Skyline aficionado and a bit of a, I guess, a scholar when it comes to Nissan and models and things like that. So it was a learning experience for me as well. So that being said, we'll jump into it, and pretty much I want to talk about the R34 GT. Okay, no 25 in it. It's just called the R34 GT. This car here basically had a Nissan RB20 Neo in it. It was DE. You're seeing a picture of it here. Not non-turbo. Really basic brake package, really basic suspension package, kind of archaic if I'm honest, but it came with an automatic gearbox. I don't believe it came in manual, but it came with an automatic gearbox. Now, it's important to remember that because this was the standard base package, you didn't get things like Tiptronic mode or anything like that. It basically was just a standard car that was first or second, third and drive, I think it was. I'll show you a picture of the interior shortly, but very basic in comparison to what the 25 GT and obviously what the GTT was. So that's the inside of it there, and I'm sure those of you who drive automatic Skylines can see that the left hand side there where the gear knob is completely different to what you guys have. That's because we in Australia never got the R34 GT. We were only allowed the 25 and up. I'm not sure why that is, but we weren't allowed to get it. And to be fair, I'm not sure if you'd want one, being how basic this one is. I mean, yes, it's still a Skyline and it's probably cheaper, but you're not going to get the enjoyment that you get out of a torquey RB25 or turbo for that matter. So look, that's the first model there that we'll go through. The second model is the R34 25 GT. Basically, this car here was the non-turbo model of the Skyline range. Again, a lot of people think that non-turbos and turbos are the same without the turbo. Not true. The non-turbos have a completely different suspension setup and a completely different brake setup. So you can tell the turbo ones from this picture here. I've just circled where obviously the intercooler air duct flows through. So that's how you can really tell if it's a turbo or not. Obviously the center gauges, depending on whether you can see them or not, but a lot of people do swap the bumpers over. So compared to the GTT, the non-turbo was a different car. It was basically the R34 GT, just with a bigger engine and a Tiptronic gearbox, if I'm honest. So this picture here is probably something you're more familiar with, obviously the Tiptronic mode and things like that. It's worth mentioning too that a large amount of R34s came in automatic. Manual wasn't too big of a deal. and a lot of cars that got exported here to Australia were automatic. They have since been changed over because parts are readily available to some degree, but I know quite a number of them who are automatic, and they tend to fetch a cheaper price anyway. But yeah, look, each to their own. So that's the R34 GT, which I'm sure a lot of people are more familiar with. So with this one here, it's a good car. I actually really rate them. I would actually have an R34 25 GT if I could find one at a decent price. The rims on the non-turbo ones didn't tend to be the 17-inch wheels. They were more, I guess, the 16-inch wheels. The next car that you're seeing now is called the R34 GTX. A lot of people get confused because they think it's a four-wheel drive version. No. In fact, the R34 25 GTX is basically the R34 GT with an RB25 engine. Don't ask me why they've put the X in there. I've got no idea, but it's not a four-wheel drive version of the R34. Okay, it was just basically the R34 GT with a 25D engine in it. So a lot of people get confused about that stuff, and I was no different. I always thought that the X would mean it was four-wheel drive, but that's not the case at all. Only the cars that have 4 at the end of their name are four-wheel drive. So things like your R34 25 GTX4, that is a four-wheel drive. The next car I want to talk about is the R34 GTV. Okay, this is probably, if you're on your P's, they only come in coupe. This is basically an R34 GTT without the T, so without the turbo. However, it comes with the same differential, the same braking system, the same suspension setup. It's virtually a turbo model, just without the turbo. So this is probably the closest thing you get to driving a turbo without it being turbo. But if you were to convert it to, I guess, a turbo, it would probably be the easiest because it's obviously got all the parts there that make it a turbo, so to speak. So that's the GTV. Ultra rare cars. I haven't seen too many of them around Australia. Those who get them tend to hold on to them or convert them to turbo. If I was in their position, I'd probably keep it as what it is, a GTV, and buy myself a turbo later on down the track. But yeah, definitely a car worth holding on to. They do tend to be a little bit more torquier than your standard 25 GTs, I guess. And they say they handle better due to obviously the turbo suspension and things like that. But that being said, I'm not sure how many of you knew about that model. The next model I want to bring up is the R34 GTX4. Okay, so the GTX4 basically was a non-turbo version of the R34 GTT. So it had the turbo brakes, had the turbo suspension. It was four-wheel drive, but it did not have a turbo. These were favoured in Japan in, I guess, places where the winters were really bad and you needed that extra grip. They're fitted with a Tesla ETS system, same as what the GTRs have, albeit a little bit more dulled down, but it is four-wheel drive. Apparently they did come in coupe as well. I have never personally seen one, but apparently they did come in coupe. I believe that the pricing for them is pretty much on par with other R34s that you will find out there, but for the most part they're like a little GTR, I would assume. I don't believe you could get them in turbo, but again, I'm just gathering all my information off the internet like everyone else really, and trying to piece it all together. So we've gone through about 3 or 4 different models now. Next obviously is the main attraction most people are familiar with, which is the R34 25 GTT. Basically this car here, turbo, 17-inch wheels are standard, traction control, climate control, you name it, it had it. And it came in 4-door or 2-door model, 4-speed automatic or 5-speed manual. Those were your options. Look, I'm not going to harp too much about the GTT because you guys probably know a lot about it, probably more so than me. but I can tell you that they still are probably the most favoured Skyline in the market. But we'll move on to the 25 GTX4. So the GTX4, again, I'm not entirely sure if it came in coupe, but I know it came in sedan, which was basically, think of an R34 25 GTT sedan, but add four-wheel drive to it, and you've got yourself basically a sedan GTR. Not really, but close enough, in my opinion. So I know a lot of people that have owned these cars. I know probably 2 or 3 people that have actually owned them, and they are absolutely amazing. If I'm honest, they tend to look, when they're worked properly, they can sometimes be quicker than the GTRs. And I'm not trying to start. I'm not trying to cause any kind of debate or anything like that. It's just that it makes sense that a lighter R34 with full drive system may be a bit quicker than obviously a GTR. This isn't in standard form, obviously. This is with a lot of work done to them. So look, at the end of the day, an R34 GTT can be as quick as a GTR, but the R34 GTR is always going to be quicker than the GTT. If you put 10 grand into an R34 GTT, it's going to be very quick, or close to very quick. But put that same 10 grand into an R34 GTR, well, it's going to be miles ahead than the other car, basically. So I'm not saying that the GTX4s are as good as GTRs. I'm just saying for the price you're paying for them and what you can do to them, it's, for most of us, probably going to be the closest thing we've got to be able to obviously driving a GTR, so to speak, which is a four-wheel drive turbo Skyline. So yeah, obviously there are a lot of different facets that make it a GTR, but we're not here to talk about the GTRs today. We're here to talk about the standard Skyline models that came out up to the GTR. Alright guys, so we're coming to the end of the video now. This is a bit of a bonus round. I'm going to run you through some models of the Skyline that you probably didn't know about. So I know a lot of people know of the R34 GTR police car. I don't think people know how much the R34 was utilised in the Japanese police service. So I've got pictures obviously showing now of not only the GTR but also the 4-door sedan, and also the 2-door 25 GTT coupe. So they were very rare, and I don't think people fully understand how enveloped the R34 Skyline was within the Japanese law enforcement. So just while these pictures are finishing up now, I'm going to show you a couple of video commercials or car commercials from the Skyline, and they go from one extreme to the other. One is basically targeted at performance driving, and the other is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of targeted at like a love song dedication thing, for like, I guess, your corporate executives. So you'll get a laugh out of those, because if I'm honest, who doesn't enjoy a good Japanese car commercial? For those of you who have seen them, they're pretty hilarious. So that's the GTT there, obviously the 2-door. So they weren't all GTRs. There was quite a large number of the 4-doors and 2-door standard model Skylines going around. But we'll have a look at those videos now, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy them as much as I did.
I'm not in love, so don't forget it. It's just a silly phase I'm going through, and just because
新しい愛のスカイライン誕生です。
Don't get me wrong, don't think you got it made.
So tell me you guys didn't find that hilarious. One extreme to the other. I'm not sure what that song has to do with the Skyline, but yeah, the Japanese, it's one extreme to the other. Racing body, driving body, and then into a somber love song dedication type deal with people riding on a Ferris wheel. It's pretty funny. So look, I want to bring up a couple of more cars now, which one I'm sure you guys probably haven't heard of, and the second one I'm sure you probably have heard of. So we'll jump into the first car now, which is the Tommykaira, I hope I'm saying it properly, 25R. This is basically a car that that Tommy pretty much bought from factory and converted it into their own, I guess, model or sub-model of the R34. It featured its own spoiler, its own rims, its own body kit, its own suspension, own braking package, own dash cluster. I mean, they really went to town with it. It's probably one of the rarest R34s you can get. I'm sure there are some rarer ones out there, but this one here, just, yeah, they spared no expense, basically. I've been fortunate enough to see one in real life here in Australia, but that's it. I know of one that was around that was stolen, unfortunately, but for the most part, these cars came out with, look, I think the normal ones were rated at 206 kilowatts, which is your average GTT Skyline. These ones had about 300 kilowatts from memory, and they were either 5-speed manual or 4-speed automatic. They didn't differentiate between the two. So they were available in 4-door models as well, but as I said, the rims that you're seeing on these cars at the moment, they are Tommykaira wheels, and that's what generally came with the cars, as well as all the bodywork and body paneling and things like that. A lot of people don't know about this car, and I don't blame you, because it's never really been advertised heavily. I was fortunate enough to manage to download some brochures on it, which are going to be popping up now. And yeah, so the 25R obviously came with a bit more power, some bits and bobs on it as well, and just basically was a extended model of the Skyline. You can see the dash cluster down the bottom there on the left, that's automatic, so they did bring out an auto version as well. The dash cluster I've seen being sold on eBay for somewhere in the vicinity of $3,000, crazy. But they also did a 4-door version as well, as you can see here, which is great. I don't think a good car company can ever pick between a 2-door or 4-door. People have different tastes, so that's the first model I wanted to talk about. The second model is the Nismo S-Tune. So this brings us to one of my favorite cars, the R34, or the R34 25 GT Turbo S-Tune. So pretty much in a nutshell, when Nissan released the parts package for Nismo for the Skyline, they had a PR fleet of cars, which is obviously the press release fleet of the cars, and the S-Tunes were all yellow. So every single S-Tune that's an authentic S-Tune from the Omori factory in Japan is paint code EV yellow, lightning yellow I think it is. So they're all yellow. So I know there are some pictures you just saw there where the car's silver and whatnot, but in actual fact they only ever came in EV1 yellow. So yeah, I mean, look, it's got Nismo front body panels, side skirts, rear bar spoiler, Nismo dash cluster, Nismo 3-gauge cluster, Nismo suspension, Nismo strut brace, Nismo, pretty much every part you can think of. They're not all the same. This one here that you're looking at now is a friend of mine in Sydney. He's got a genuine S-Tune, which is amazing. As you can see here, this again is another model or car collection they brought out. It's in silver. It shouldn't be because they only ever came out in yellow. This is what my car will end up looking like eventually. This one here, obviously with the S-Tune spoiler, but in the pewter color that we've got. So as you can see here in the next picture, you've got the R34 Skyline FR Sports parts Nismo. So these cars here, you can see they're all EV1 yellow, and the parts catalog were featured part of the PR fleet of S-Tunes. I guess I like them the most because I feel like they're a purist car. They're a car that Nismo made not to be obviously a high selling or advertising fuel economy and stuff like that. They just dumped a bunch of racing parts into them and wanted people to enjoy. So yeah, look, that brings us to the end of the video, guys. I know this was a really long one. I don't expect everyone to watch this whole thing, so if you hung around to the end, great, thank you. Thanks for everyone who subscribes. You guys make my day. Thanks to everyone who asks questions. Again, always happy to answer. Can't thank you guys enough. Thank you for tuning in again. We're going to get to work soon. The car's going in to get repaired tomorrow from where that guy hit me on the front bumper, as per the last video. So we're going to go in and get that repaired. The spoiler's also going to be painted there as well. I'm not game enough to try painting myself because I know I'm going to make a mess of it. So I'll leave that to the professionals. But again, thank you everyone who tuned in and watched. I hope it wasn't boring. And yeah, look, thanks again. Peace.